Now, I know I've told this story before, but with this beautiful background, I just had to tell it again. It's called The Treasure in the Forest by H.G. Wells. The Catholic Men's Podcast, helping you find good works of literature for the Catholic gentleman. Treasures of wickedness shall profit nothing, but justice shall deliver from death. The Book of Proverbs. The man with the carved paddle stopped. It should be somewhere around here, he said. He shipped the paddle and held his arms out straight before him. The canoe was now approaching the land. The bay opened out, and a gap in the white surf of the reef marked where the little river ran out to the sea. The forest here came close to the beach. Far beyond, dim and almost cloud-like in texture, rose the mountains. The other man in the forepart of the canoe had a sheet of yellow paper on his knee. "Come and look at this, Evans," he said. Both men spoke in low tones, and their lips were hard and dry. The man called Evans came swaying along the canoe until he could look over his companion's shoulder. The paper had the appearance of a rough map. By much folding, it was creased and worn to the pitch of separation, and the second man held the discolored fragments together where they had parted. On it, one could dimly make out, in almost obliterated pencil, the outline of the bay. "Here," said Evans, "is the reef, and here's the gap." He ran his thumbnail over the chart. "This curved and twisting line is the river, and this star is the place." "It's odd," said Evans after a pause. "What are these little marks down here for?" "Chinese writing," said the man with the map. "Of course, he was Chinese," said Evans. "They all were," said the man with the map. They both sat for some minutes staring at the land while the canoe drifted slowly. "Your turn with the paddle now, Hooker," said he, and his companion quietly folded up his map, put it in his pocket, passed Evans carefully, and began to paddle. Evans sat with his eyes half closed and remembered the night when he and Hooker had hit upon the Chinaman's secret. He saw the moonlit trees, the little fire burning, and the black figures of the three Chinamen and heard them talking together in pidgin English, for they came from different provinces. A Spanish galleon from the Philippines, hopelessly aground, and its treasure, buried against the day of return, lay in the background of the story. A shipwrecked crew, thinned by disease, a quarrel, and the needs of discipline, and at last taking to their boats, never to be heard of again. Shanghai, only a year since, wandering ashore, had happened upon the ingots, hidden for 200 years, had deserted his junk and reburied them with infinite toil, single-handed, but very safe. He laid great stress on the safety. It was a secret of his. Now he wanted help to return and exhume them. Presently, the little map fluttered, and the voices sank. A fine story for two stranded British wastrels to hear. As they drew close to the lagoon, Evans thought of the moment when he had Shanghai's pigtail in his hand. The cunning little face of Shanghai, first keen and furious like a startled snake, and then fearful, treacherous, and pitiful, became overwhelmingly prominent in his mind. In the end, Shanghai had grinned, a most incomprehensible and startling grin. They came at last to the shore and pulled the light canoe far up the beach and then went towards the edge of the jungle. They came at last to the shore, pulled the light canoe far up the beach, and then went up towards the edge of the jungle. At first it was toilsome going, but very speedily the trees became larger and the ground beneath them opened out. The blaze of the sunlight was replaced by insensible degrees by cool shadow. The trees became at last vast pillars that rose up to a canopy of greenery far overhead. Dim white flowers hung from their stems, and ropey creepers swung from tree to tree. The shadow deepened. Evans shivered. It seems almost cold here after the blaze outside. Presently they saw far ahead a gap in the somber darkness, and they heard the rush of water. "Here's the river. We should be close to it now," said Hooker. They advanced slowly, looking curiously about them. Suddenly, Evans stopped. "What the devil's that?" he said. Hooker followed his finger. "Something blue," he said. It had come into view as they topped a gentle swell of the ground. Then he began to distinguish what it was. He advanced suddenly with hasty steps until the body that belonged to the limp hand and arm had become visible. The thing was the figure of a Chinaman lying on his face. The two men drew closer and stood staring silently at this ominous dead body. It lay in a clear space among the trees. Nearby was a spade after the Chinese pattern, and farther off lay a scattered heap of stones close to a freshly dug hole. "Somebody has been here before," said Hooker, clearing his throat. Then suddenly Evans began to swear and rave and stomp upon the ground. Hooker turned white but said nothing. He advanced towards the prostrate body. He saw the neck was puffed and purple, and the hands and ankles were quite swollen. "Quiet," he said, and suddenly turned away and went towards the excavation. There he gave a cry of surprise. He shouted to Evans, who was following him slowly, "You fool, it's all right, it's still here." Evans hurried to the hole. Already half exposed by the ill-fated wretch beside them lay a number of dull yellow bars. Clearing off the soil with his bare hands, Evans pulled one of the heavy masses out. As he did so, a little thorn pricked his hand. He pulled the delicate spike out with his fingers and lifted the ingot. "Only gold or lead could weigh like this," he said exultantly. Hooker was still looking at the dead Chinaman. He was puzzled. "He stole a march on his friends," he said at last. "He came here alone, and some poisonous snake has killed him. I wonder how he found the place." Evans took his jacket off and spread it on the ground and flung 2 or 3 ingots on it. Presently, he found that another little thorn had punctured his skin. "This is as much as we can carry," said he. Then suddenly, with a queer rush of irritation, "What are you staring at?" Hooker turned to him. "I can't stand him." He nodded towards the corpse. "It's so like—" "Rubbish," said Evans. "All Chinamen are alike." Hooker looked into his face. "I'm going to bury that anyhow before I lend a hand with this stuff." "Don't be a fool, Hooker," said Evans. "Let that mass of corruption bide." Hooker hesitated, and then his eye went carefully over the brown soil about them. "It scares me somehow," he said. "The thing is," said Evans, "what to do with these ingots? Shall we rebury them over here, or take them across the strait in the canoe?" Hooker thought. His puzzled gaze wandered among the tall tree trunks and up into the remote sunlit greenery overhead. He shivered again as his eye rested upon the blue figure of the Chinaman. He stared searchingly among the gray depths between the trees. "What's come to you, Hooker?" said Evans. "Have you lost your wits?" Let's get the gold out of this place anyhow," said Hooker. He took the ends of the collar of the coat in his hands, and Evans took the opposite corners, and they lifted the mass. "Which way?" said Evans. "To the canoe?" "It's queer," said Evans, when they had advanced only a few steps, "but my arms still ache with that paddling." "Curse it," he said. "But they ache. I must rest." They let the coat down. Evan's face was white, and little drops of sweat stood out upon his forehead. "It's stuffy somehow in this forest." Then, with an abrupt transition to unreasonable anger, "What is the good of waiting here all day? Lend a hand, I say. You've done nothing but moon since we saw that dead Chinaman." Hooker was looking steadfastly at his companion's face. He helped raise the coat bearing the ingots, and they went forward, perhaps 100 yards in silence. Evans began to breathe heavily. "Can't you speak?" he said. "What's the matter with you?" said Hooker. Evans stumbled and then, with a sudden curse, flung the coat from him. He stood for a moment, staring at Hooker, and then, with a groan, clutched at his own throat. "Don't come near me," he said, and went and leant against a tree. Then, in a steadier voice, "I'll be better in a minute." Presently, his grip upon the trunk loosened, and he slipped slowly down the stem of the tree until he was a crumpled heap at its foot. His hands were clenched convulsively. His face became distorted with pain. Hooker approached him. "Don't touch me! Don't touch me," said Evans in a stifled voice. "Put the gold back on the coat." "Can't I do anything for you?" said Hooker. "Put the gold back on the coat." As Hooker handled the ingots, he felt a little prick on the ball of his thumb. He looked at his hand and saw a slender thorn, perhaps 2 inches in length. Evans gave an inarticulate cry and rolled over. Hooker's jaw dropped. He stared at the thorn for a moment with dilated eyes. Then he looked at Evans, who was now crumpled together on the ground, his back bending and straightening spasmodically. Then he looked through the pillars of the trees and network of creeper stems to where, in the dim gray shadow, the blue-clad body of the Chinaman was still indistinctly visible. He thought of the little dashes in the corner of the plan, and in a moment he understood. "God help me," he said, for the thorns were similar to those the Dajaks poison and use in their blowing tubes. He understood now what Chiang Hai's assurance of the safety of his treasure meant. He understood that grin now. "Evans," he cried, but Evans was silent and motionless, save for a horrible spasmodic twitching of his limbs. A profound silence brooded over the forest. Then Hooker began to suck furiously at the little pink spot on the ball of his thumb, sucking for dear life. Presently, he felt a strange aching pain in his arms and shoulders, and his fingers seemed difficult to bend. Then he knew that sucking was no good. Abruptly, he stopped, and sitting down by the pile of ingots and resting his chin upon his hands and his elbows upon his knees, stared at the distorted but still stirring body of his companion. Chiang Hai's grin came into his mind again. The dull pain spread towards his throat and grew slowly in intensity. Far above him, a faint breeze stirred the greenery, and the white petals of some unknown flower came floating down through the gloom. Thank you all so much for listening. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you. Let's go, boy. Am I kneeling on a fish hook? What in the world?